This is Rabbi Sachs. Welcome to the Chai Academy, being broadcasted from the Chai Center. We have been talking over the past few sessions about the Holocaust. So this course is called the Holocaust series. Not a happy topic in any stretch of the information, but those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So each class in the course is self-contained, and you can listen to one course and not listen to the other, and you will understand. You will not be lost. Yesterday we spoke about Auschwitz, Birkenau, concentration camps, extermination camps, etc. Today's topic is Dr. Mengele. Now, aside from Hitler and Eichmann, probably the next name that brings up nausea in any good and moral person would be Mengele. So, Joszef Mengele was a doctor. He actually had 2 degrees. He was an MD, but before he became an MD, he had a PhD. So we're talking about a incredibly educated person who ended up doing things that an animal wouldn't do, right? It just I guess that's human beings have the ability to descend below the animal kingdom. We just fall apart. So this Mengele was in college, for many years. I think he became a PhD in 1935, and he became an MD in 1938. Anyway, so who was he? So essentially, he was responsible for and he volunteered for this, by the way. Most other doctors who worked, Nazi doctors, who worked at Auschwitz or any concentration camp for that matter, felt it was tedious to choose who shall live and who shall die. As we discussed yesterday, if the doctor's thumb went to the left, you were immediately taken to the gas chambers. Chances are you were frail, a woman, or a child. But if his thumb moved to the right, then you were taken into the workforce, and you became a cog in the wheel in the Nazi war machine that sought to destroy you. So he enjoyed it. And so that was the first thing he did. And by the way, once if he said go left and you died, as we discussed yesterday, maybe that was the best thing to happen in some ironic twist. But if you went to the right and you lived, it didn't mean that you were done with him. So there's many stories. There's many stories of his sick, evil behavior. Is that an example of decisions that he made in Auschwitz, which he volunteered for, by the way. He volunteered he wanted to be transferred to a concentration camp. And we'll see why in a minute. But so there was this. They tell the story. There was this barrack that everybody in the barrack had lice. So most of the time they deloused the place, right? They I guess they shore your hair, and they cleaned the place and disinfected the place. One time, at the whim of this brute's. At his whim, he said, okay, all 750 women in these barracks shall be exterminated in the gas chamber. And off they went. So he made decisions that just killed people, where only God has the decision really to give life and take life. But he was godlike. And he was just evil. And as I said, he loved what he did. Now, he was famous, and this is probably more so than the right and the left. He was infamous because he was a doctor, and his PhD in exploring genetics and things like that. He was famous or infamous to experiment on the poor, unfortunate, wretched souls that found themselves, under his banner, under his authority, and he had no compunction. And by the way, for his experimentation in Auschwitz, in the beginning, is before he had to run and flee, but his experimentation, he was awarded the War Merit Cross. It's an extremely high Nazi honor from Nazi Germany. His experimentation, it was considered so vital to for posterity's sake and for medicine's sake. He was awarded a medal. I mean, we're talking obscene. So he was a sadist. I think that's the best thing I can say about him, and it's nice. I'm being mild. He was a sadist. He had no compunction whatsoever, and in fact, because he was a sadist, Auschwitz, his fiefdom was utopia, because he could perform experiments that were all permitted, without anybody telling him, no, this crosses the decent line, the moral line. This is you're in dark territory here, Joszef. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. Right. So, a couple things that we know about him. He was fascinated by twins, fascinated, and he did a lot of experiments on twins. And one of the reasons why he was fascinated by twins is because he was trying to figure out how to increase the German populace. So if he could figure out how to give multiple births, and what the ramifications and the consequences are of multiple births, he would be able to increase the Aryan population, the Third Reich. And by the way, outside of Auschwitz, he was also considered a hero, because he was doing experimentation, albeit probably this time with anesthesia. He was experimenting how to breed a race of Aryans who are tall, fit, blonde hair, blue-eyed. And in order to do this, he had to experiment on human guinea pigs, without the benefit of anesthesia, without the victim, the patient, the victim agreeing to this. He had full reign, and he was sick individual. He used to inject harmful fluids in the body to see how long it would take from injection to death. He used to practice and have a stopwatch. How quickly can he castrate a man, including the stitching, mediocre stitching, I'm sure. How quickly he could do it, and it was really, it was to think about this man. This man was a doctor. He took the Hippocratic oath, right? Do no harm to a patient. That's the first part of the oath, right? Do no harm. He was a perverse hypocrite. So he had a fascination with twins, as we said. He had a fascination with dwarfs, right? I'm not sure why. He also had a fascination with heterochromatic. It's people who had one eye one color and the other eye another color. There are some people, few and far between, but what he used to do, he used to inject dye into the other eye to see if he can match the color. This is what a bastard he was. And nowadays I think they have contacts for this, but he used to inject dye. So this way, if an Aryan was born with brown eyes, he could turn them blue. Right? When towards the end of the war, right, when he saw in 1945, when he saw that the end was near and the Russians were coming. So he got himself transferred from Auschwitz, which was in Poland, to a German concentration camp called Grossrossen. And then, when that looked like it was coming to an end, he managed to get himself to Czechoslovakia. One of the most disturbing truths about Joszef Mengele is in June of 45, he was arrested by the United States Army. He was a prisoner under his own name, Joszef Mengele. But because the Allies were in complete, the documents were in disarray, they didn't have their act together, and because he did not have the SS tattoo on his body. So the SS, they had their blood type, and usually under their arm, so they shaved them under their arm, they put their tattoo, and then the hair grew back, and if they needed to know what blood type, so they used to take a quick look. So he didn't have it done. So because he didn't have it done, he wasn't considered SS. But this guy was creme de la creme of the SS. He was the medical, division of the SS. And he was let go. He was let go. And so his name wasn't on the radar for whatever reason, and he was let go. It's to me it's unbelievable. What a comedy of errors. He went from he went to Czechoslovakia, and after Czechoslovakia he bounced around in Central America, and then he went to South America, and by the way, in Central America, in Paraguay, and then in Argentina, and then in Brazil, in all these places, he had businesses. He had businesses. He had a slew of aliases. A slew of aliases. I mean, we're talking about 6, 7 identity papers that he got, and I don't know if you're familiar. There was when the war was, when it was obvious the war was coming to a close. There was the SS protected itself, and they had people issue. I think it's called. I think there's a movie about it, the Odessa File, right? One of John Voight's earlier movies, a book by Robert Ludlum, I believe. But they were a supportive group to help these top level SS people get out. They're given identity papers. They were put on this train, on that train, and boats, and a lot of them, much to the shame of South America, specifically Argentina, and Brazil. They accepted these Nazis, and even when there were warrants for these people arrests, Argentina didn't cooperate fully, and I'll give you an example. They had an address on Mengele where he was living in Argentina, and they requested, right, the war crimes. They requested that he be extradited from Argentina to Nuremberg, and the Argentines went to the address, and he wasn't there. He had moved. So they said, okay, so this warrant is no longer valid because it has the wrong address. By the time they got the next address, he was gone. He went to Brazil. So this is horrific stuff. I mean, we're talking about there's such a huge amount of culpability here. The United States made a mistake, but Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, these people are it's unforgivable. It's really unforgivable. He had businesses. He had farms. He had coffee. He was growing coffee. He was he had a pharmacy. He went into his family's business. So his family is, I think it's called Mengele and Sons or something. And he joined the family business, albeit not in Germany, but in Argentina. And everybody knew who the Mengeles were, that they had this He was part of the business. Right? They produced farming equipment. That's how he knew about farms. It was it was terrible. In one of these places, by the way, I forget which country, he actually was practicing medicine unlicensed because he was a doctor. So he actually did well for himself between all his businesses. He lived, while those that he killed or hurt and maimed, wounded, suffered. He had the life of Riley, albeit he had to, albeit he had to, it was on the run. He had to be careful. He was once accused and let go of performing an unlicensed abortion on a young woman that died. He let go. He was so nervous of the attention that it may procure, so he ran to another city and set up shop there. Now, there was a period of time where he was able to get, listen to this, he was able to get a passport under a West German passport under his own name, and he traveled. He traveled to Europe. He traveled to West Germany. He met his son, and those that facilitated meeting his son, so they were nervous that the son. So it was Uncle Fritz. This is your uncle. Rolf Mengele, the son, did know in the end who he was, but he didn't want to. But he traveled under his own passport. It's like amazing to me. And he now the Mossad was after him. The Simon Wiesenthal was after him. Martin, all these names, they were after him, and there were so many different organizations, crime, who was seeking to have his head, because his name was brought up in Nuremberg more than anybody else's name, and he wasn't there. So it's interesting. In I think it was 1985, in Israel, they actually had a trial in abstention. They didn't know where he ended up. But in 1985, there was a trial. Witnesses came forth. This is what he did to me. This is what he did to my twin. This is what he did to us, right? And it was just horror stories, one horror story after the other. And they even say, by the way, they even say that that at one point the Mossad was tracking him down, but then their budget was cut, and the search was called off. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating for not only a Jew, but I think anybody that has good morals, right? To know that this person was hidden. This person, there were many people, and he was in business partners with I think Stammers was their name. They eventually figured out who he was, but they didn't say anything. Right? He had multiple business partners, and nobody said anything. And even his son Rolf said, "Listen, I'm going to tell him my father. I'm not going to tell him my father." Anyway, his demise, which took a long time to prove, his demise was he had had a stroke, thankfully. So he didn't die healthy. He had had a stroke, and then one time he was visiting friends or business partners, and he was swimming in the lake, and he had another stroke. And because of this second stroke, he actually drowned. His body was recovered. He was buried under an alias, and eventually the truth came out, and they exhumed his body, and they were 95% sure. This is, by the way, 1979 is when he died. So, all right, this bastard, started to work in Auschwitz in 1938, 48, 58, 68, 70. The guy lived 40 years. After everything he did, he lived 40 years. If that doesn't hurt, what does? The good thing is he drowned. It wasn't a pleasant death. Baruch Hashem. He was buried, and then eventually he was exhumed, and then they were 95% sure, and then finally, they didn't know this for many years, but in 1985 when they had that trial, they didn't know for sure. It was only after then that they got intel. And in 1992, finally with DNA, they were able to positively 100% identify that this was Joszef Mengele. His bones are used for like after he was exhumed, he wasn't really buried again, but rather it's some I forget, to be honest, I forget, but it's for medical research. So his bones were preserved and used for the new generation, the new generation doctors to be able to look at the skeletal, and so they use his bones. I mean, to me, what's interesting to note, by the way, is he had a diary. First of all, he took out boxes of medical research, boxes, right? And he's running. He gave it to people to hide so that they can, when the Third Reich raises its ugly head, when it prevails, when it's victorious, the research should not have been lost. The incredible research that he did, but he had a diary, and somebody got hold of that diary, and instead of handing it over to the authorities, instead of giving it to the Holocaust Museum, they put it up for sale at an auction, and it was bought. Thankfully, it was bought by a Holocaust survivor who could not stomach that this thing is on the market and people are bidding for it, and if it doesn't stop, it will increase in value. So he finally put an end to it, and he bought Mengele's diary, and he gave it to the authorities. And I believe the museum has it. I'm not sure which museum, but it's they have it. This is an extremely sad tale. He's a man that should have been caught, but due to the Odessa file, due to this underground, and I'm sure they were paid great money, right? To get out the head, the SS, anybody who was SS, and the corrupt Argentinian, Brazilian, and other South American, Central American. What a horror. Now, most Nazis, just for the record, most Nazis did end up in Argentina, which is a really blight. It's a real stain on Argentina. They were a haven. For whatever reason, Argentina embraced them. It's probably money, to be honest. And if you know the story of capturing Eichmann, so where did they catch him? They caught him in Argentina, right? The Mossad got him, and they wanted to do the same thing after Eichmann. They really wanted to catch Mengele. And there's conspiracy theories out there, and they're just that, conspiracy theories, that Hitler himself is in Argentina. That, nobody really saw his body, and the Russians claim that they took his body, and and the body that was burnt was not Hitler, etc. So there are conspiracy theories out there. Me personally, I can't wrap my head around that. The fact that the very fact that Hitler possibly had a long life, it would put me in a psych ward. So I choose to just distance myself from that. But Argentina, and I don't care how many years. What's evil is evil. Argentina has a lot to answer for. So does anybody that was complicit in this. I don't know how many survivors are left, Mengele survivors, but it is justice was never served in this world. We believe that justice is served, and I remember the day Arafat died. There was a heat wave in New York, and I looked at heaven and I said, okay, hell is burning very brightly and very hot. We believe, and the Mishnah says it, right, that there is consequences for one's actions. I hope and pray someone like Mengele does not get a moment of spiritual peace, does not get a moment of comfort, and a moment of any serenity. I hope he burns and burns and burns, and his bones just rot in hell, to him and all the rest of the gang. God bless. Continue hopefully tomorrow.